first time I met Grace was in my classroom. She came in to teach poetry for a grant for Guildhall, and those kids were writing these are 8th graders. They were writing poetry within 30 minutes. And they read them back to Grace, and it was just like, it was absolutely stunning. But the second time I met Grace was during the pandemic. It was an ice storm, and my neighbor called and said, I have a neighbor who I'd like to come over to sit by the fire because our electricity is out. Can you help me? Because it's an ice storm. And so I was in my pajamas. I got my boots on and my lantern, and I went out and I said to my neighbor, you know, this is great. Who are we helping out? And she said, her name is Grace, she's a poet. And I said, oh, great. Her name is Grace, she's a poet. What's her last name? And she said, it's Grace Schulman. And I said, you gotta be kidding me. Really? It's like an ice storm, it's the pandemic, and I'm going to Grace Schulman's house. This is crazy. So we went there, and we brought her over to my neighbor's house, talking about teaching and writing the whole way. Like, that was the most important burning thing, teaching and writing. Not the fact that we couldn't put our foot forward and whatever, but it was like, what are you teaching and what are you writing? And that was like the most important thing. So that was really exciting for me. Later I got to know Grace, and she asked me about one of the students that was in the class 20 years ago, and said, do you remember that student wrote that poem? And she remembered the gist of the poem. And I said, yeah, I do remember that. And she said, what happened to that student? I said, I think she became a doctor, actually, not a poet. But I still, even though Grace was in my classroom 20 years ago, Grace is still in my classroom. We read yesterday Fireplace Bay by Grace. The students were really interested in the communications aspect of it. We've read After the Fall by Grace in my classroom. The students were really into it. So there's like something about the fact that we live here. We live in Springs. We live in this place where there's all this inspiration and all these things that we can take away from us and love and use or just live with in Springs. And so I would like to thank Duck Creek for having this whole space here, which is, you know, what do you say, Pantheon to John Little, and to the whole idea of having art in Springs and being in Springs and continuing the journey that Springs has been on with artists and continuing all the things that we have, that we love, the sunlight, the beaches, the roads, everything, and also Duck Creek and also Grace Schulman.
Gosh, thank you, Meredith. Thank you so much, Meredith and Jess, and all of you who have arranged this wonderful reading in this series and the arts. And I must say that this group of people is celestial, the very best people in the East End. I'm so happy to see you. I'm going to read today from an advanced copy of my new book that's coming out in November. I just have this one copy, and I can read from it. And I'm going to read mostly Springs poems. Springs poems, because I've written about other places and people, but I do think that Springs is the closest to my consciousness. My late friend Hedda Stern said, to make art, you don't have to go to faraway places. You write what is in front of you. And we are so lucky to have springs in front of us. Most of the people here are dedicated to the arts, and I think you all know what I mean. The first poem I'm going to read is one that Meredith spoke of, the poem that she read to her class, and it was written at a time when power was out and the landlines were down and the cell phones didn't work and communication was at a standstill. Well, in solace, I went to Fireplace Bay, which is down the road. Fireplace Bay is a place where the settlers lighted fires to alert the people across the bay, to communicate with them. And the Indians before them lit fires to warn passing ships of various dangers. So communication was assured there. And I thought, well, maybe we should try that. Fireplace Bay. Where are the fires that crackled on this hill? The leap, the sparks, the urgency of wood smoke. Fires that singed, that heightened conversations and shadowed sunken jaws. The Montauk people stoked magenta flames that warned of danger. The colonists tossed seaweed over fires for smoke that twisted into bearded clouds and shouted to the island across the sound. Food is on its way. Smoke clouds replying. Sheep's wool newly sheared, ready for transport, and send over clamming rakes from Parson's smithy. Speak, fires. Last night a cedar fell in the downpour, crashing power lines that need repair. Cell phones fail without towers nearby. Computers sleep in this speechless neighborhood. I dream of fires and of a surfman who recounts his catch in stories that flare up in orange blaze or circle into smoke like words. The sound. Accabonac, Shinnecock, Peaconic, Napeag, the creek, the bay, the stream, the sounds of consonants, hard seas and caves, Atlantic, the ocean's surge, the clicks of waves collapsed on rocks in corrugated waters, the crowd circling a stranded whale sent by the god Moshe to beach at Paumanok. The Montauks left us names. Their successors, Millers and Bennetts, whose names are carved on local gravestones, rode rough tides, strung trawl lines for cod, and even on Sundays parked vans by the sea and gazed in fear until commercial hulls replaced their boats. Surfmen gave names to streets that bag the tourists who prize their charm. I hear old sailors rage in many languages against cold winds. The light now clear, now haze. Pharaohs and mulfers, whalers, names unknown, hurl throaty curses that rise with the sound of waves and with the cries of an ice-colored gull plucking scallops in shallows. This poem is called Without a Flame. It's the title poem of one of my books. like a house plant on a windowsill, looking out on other windowsills of a treeless block. I couldn't take it in when told I owned this land with oaks and maples scattered like crowds on Sundays, and an underground strung not with pipes, but snaky roots that writhed when my husband sank a rhododendron, now flaunting pinks, high as an attic window. This land we call our place was never ours. If it belonged to anyone, it was the Montauk chief who traded it for mirrors, knowing it wasn't his. Not the sailors who brought the blacksmith iron, nor the farmers who dried salt hay, nor even the later locals, whale hunters, the harpooner from Sumatra, the cook from Borneo, who, like my ancestors, wandered from town to port without a plane. Their names inside me, though not in the registries. No more than geese in flight, shadowing the lawn, cries piercing wind, do we possess these fields, given the title, never the dominion. But here we are in April, watching earth rise with bellflowers that toll, brawl, call, and silence, daffodils that gleam yellow through sea haze, and cedars at sunrise, asking for flame like a cake with tears of birthday candles. Come visit us by shore, up a mud lane, duck under the elm's branches, thick with leaves, on land deeded to us but not to keep, and take my hand, mine only to give for a day that shines like corn silk in wind. We rent, borrow, or share, even our bodies, and never own all that we know and love. This is a love poem to my late husband, Moonshell. August, I walk this shore in search of wholeness, among snapped razor clams and footless quahaus. How easily my palm cradles a moonshell coughed up on shore. I stroked the fragments as last night. I stroked your arm, smelling of salt, scrubbed clean by the sea air. Once you loped near me, now, in my mind's eye, your rubbery foot soles track sand hills, the shape of waves you no longer straddle. You inch forward, step, comma, pause. Your silence is the wordless rage of pain. But still at night, our bodies merge in sleep and fit unbroken, like the one perfect shell I've never found and can only imagine, and crack when we're apart. I clutch the moonshell, guardian of unknowing, chipped and silent, until I fling it down and feel its loss. Broken, it fit my hand, and I was whole. I'd like to read a poem from a past book, which happened to be edited by a marvelous editor in this audience, Pat Strawn, and I hope she still likes it. I have to explain that one reason I liked spring so much and I kept writing out of here was that school was out in New York where I teach. I'd come out here, especially on the high holy days when I should have been doing family observance, but instead I sat by the bay in Laos Point, not without guilt. But this poem is a ghazal. It's a 7th century Arabic form which was brought to America by Aga Shahid Ali, a wonderful poet who believed in the true ghazal. It's the true form, which is kind of complicated to go into, but the odd thing about this ghazal is that it's a Yom Kippur ghazal, an Arabic form. Prayer for Aga Shahid Ali. Yom Kippur, wearing a bride's dress bought in Jerusalem, I peer through swamp reeds, my thought in Jerusalem. Velvet on grass, odd, but I learned young to keep this day just as I can, if not as I ought, in Jerusalem. Like sleep or love, prayer may surprise the woman who loves by a stream, or the child distraught in Jerusalem. My Arab dress has blue, green, yellow threads, the shades of mosaics hand-wrought in Jerusalem that both peoples prize. Like the blue-yellow dome of the rock, the strung beads and cloves said to ward off the drought in Jerusalem. Both savor things that grow wild, coreopsis in April, the rose that buds late like an afterthought in Jerusalem. While car bombs flared, an Arab poet translated Hebrew verses whose flame caught in Jerusalem. And you, Shahid, sail Yudah Halevi, see as I, on our lips, course like an Argonaut in Jerusalem. Stone lions pace the Sultan's gate, while almonds bloom into images, Hebrew and Arabic, wrought in Jerusalem. No words, no metaphors, or knives that gore flesh on streets where the people have fought in Jerusalem. As this spider weaves a web in silence, may Hebrew and Arabic be woven taut in Jerusalem. Here at the bay, I see my face in the shallows and plumb for the true self our Abraham sought in Jerusalem. Open the gates to rainbow-colored words of outlanders, their sounds untaught in Jerusalem. My name is Grace, Hannah in Hebrew, and in Arabic. May its meaning, God's love, at last be taught in Jerusalem. They say poetry makes nothing happen, and I've been reading that poem for a while, and there's still dissension in the Middle East. It hasn't helped at all, but I keep reading it anyway. One thing I love about Springs is the new friends that I've made here, some of whom I see before me, the old friends too. But this poem is about the new. There's a newness about Springs, which I find very inspiring. Meteor. That night, the wind-chapped table shouted new. Peaches, bread, still warm, and consecrated by watery breezes on the shore of a town whose very name, Springs, was a carillon that jangled newness. Talking of ancient ruins with my new friends, I allowed the wind to rinse regrets, lights winking miles across the bay, noiseless, but for the surge of waters altar white before my feet in sand. And when we turned off lanterns to look skyward for the Perseids, it was meteor season. A comet rode queenly across the sky before it curved and fell. Seeing myself a speck in the firmament, I remembered that rock may burn suddenly, blaze into flame, and spin for centuries before it shines, wanting to be remade. Gray rock, the same that sparkles with mica flecks by day when breakers slap it clean. Nothing is new. Nothing alive cannot be altered. And this is a brand new poem. One of the new in my new and selected. That is called Tessera. Tessera is a Latin word for objects, stones, bits of glass, shells, which the Roman artists used for mosaics. And I saw these on the beach one day. I saw a lot of shells and stones that reminded me of Tessera. Beach stones tick wet sand like gleaming comets, ivory eggs, ant-sized silvery beads, and red ochre clocks wash in from mountains. Their ancestors, they are, well, forgive me, chips off the old rocks. Stones are tooled by the ocean, the master jeweler, carrying the same for quartz and bottle caps. Stuck on land, stones cast tear-shaped shadows that vanish after dark just as my footsteps disappear with each new wave on shore. Stone-faced, they conceal an inner wildness with memories of shipwrecks, cholera, gulls' broken wings, and shorelines that erode. In fallow times, I'll scan the sea for answers. Silence. Then the message of the stones. Outer blankness, inner fire. The Roman artist who searched for tessera, wooden bits, glass shards, and cracked shells must have known that beach stones, seemingly dull, would shimmer when grouted in cement for mosaics flaming in yellow gold. Green River, which you all know, a few roads down from here, Green River Cemetery. Grave ground can't hold them. They crowd into sight, elbowing to show you who they were and what they offer. Sea waves in bronze, oddly near a factory plaster angel. One gravel path connects artists and farmers, all villagers, no other faith in common. Jean Stafford speaks knives to Elaine de Kooning. And both lie a few graves from the Bennetts, my locksmith's family. Frank O'Hara laughs to see a white paint tube left as a calling card on Jackson Pollock's boulder. I want to ask them what the earth gave them when breath failed, the day they tried to drip more oils, type more words, or grind another key. My question would dissolve in wind. The answer, obvious. All work is unfinished, by definition, in brass or on the page. Letters unread, the empty fishing net, the riderless bike slanted against a tree on the road to Green River. This next poem is about Miles Davis, who I find visits, inhabits many of my poems. And this is, but somehow I saw his image here in Springs. Cool jazz. Late afternoon, under a salmon sky, a night heron stalking with charcoal plumage leans sideways like a bowling pin off balance on an island risen for the day, only to sink later with the tide. I saw Miles Davis lean aslant, a night heron on Broadway, shoulders hunched, horn pointed down, until he hoisted brass and fleed away. Sadness of Spain, his sadness, with a tight mute and without vibrato, making a sound like moaning underwater, then wider, embracing all sound, turn cries, wind and cedars. In the silence of a heron stabbing minnows, you could hear Miles, his hunger of another kind, deeper, gnawing, harder to feed. Applause rose up like water slapping the shore. He lowered his eyes, muttered, "Endings just drag me," and walked off the platform. The heron flew. One more Springs poem, and then I'll go elsewhere. This is called Headstones. The Native American Montauk Indians did not have headstones, don't have headstones. They don't have markers on their grave. So I kind of saw shells as their markers. They did work with shells. They made wampum out of shells. That was their livelihood and what they did so well. Headstones, twin tide lines of shells gleam on wet sand like a giant's tire tracks. Fluted white chips, cracked blues, a purple comma, shards of whelks the Montauk's whittled down to beads and strung as wampum. Shining barter or protection against attack. What strategy that art? I see the Montauk Sachem Wyandanch, offered knives for land, crave only muxes, drills for threading clamshells into necklaces. Sell these plains, why not? Only a name after all. Besides, he would have given land and sea with all its whales for peace. Yes, he would sign there, scrawled on page, his stamped an X. No X, but two stick figures, their hands clasped. Hands fell as leaves, Wyandanch dead, his language veiled. Names faded that had vowels like gulls' cries. Pontiac, Sasacato, never on headstones. In a nameless grave, diggers found clamshell money strung with weeds, struck with the island's sand and water face. Strewn like coins in Egypt's tombs, new mintings, whose glossy hollows stored a people's prayers and tagged the one who wore them powerful, now holier for being buried by it. The Town Yacht Club has headstones, gazing photos, racing trophies. Once, as a dinner guest, I drove past roads with names of English counties, Norfolk and Kent, then found a seaside table. Wyandanch would not have been invited, nor would my grandfather Dave, much less my ancestor Shmuel. But there I was, staring at shell toss, hearing breakers roar, Wyandanch and Quashashem, his daughter, her name the sound of seawater through stones, snapped shells their monument, their living marker. Sun gone, white jackets circled linen, the voices swelled, long open vowels rolled in. Sharp consonants clicked and crackled with the surf to drown out even the historical cannon fire when men lowered the flag. I have written about other places as well, and most recently, my last book of poems, The Marble Bed, is named for the wonderful sculptures in the Stagliani Cemetery in Genoa. Would you like to come in? That really caught my imagination. I really went after them. Particularly this, I'll just read one of the poems from that sequence. And my publisher was kind enough to publish the pictures with the sculptures. This is called Angel. So this is death, lifelike in marble and unconsoling on a merchant's tomb. No man with a scythe, no man at all, but her, slim-hipped in an airy gown, nipped at the waist. On the high breast one hand rests, the slender fingers limp, waiting to beckon or direct. Come hither, lips, barbed wings, the eyes translucent, clear lakes you want to fathom. But the gaze says, I don't want to be known or understood. Angel of cold passion, angel of sex and death, essential answers hidden in one van. When I pass by, she turns to follow. Death, you terrify, just as you lure me with a knowing glance. Recently, I got myself ordained online as a minister to perform weddings of my friends. I did one of them so far, and it reminded me of my own wedding, which was hard to go through. I love my husband and all of that, but the wedding itself was difficult for this reason that I wrote about. It's called The Vow. Kind of a nightmare. That day I stepped gingerly with my father playing father. Actors played their parts. Down the blue carpeted aisle to be wed, or tried for treason. A skeletal pianist fingered a funeral march, hitting wrong notes. We passed Mom in a dress sizes too large she bought to play the mother of the bride. My own tight bodice pinched as I gasped for breath, bound for a new life, knowing the old would do. I glanced upward at friends playing hope. My roses drying brown as I neared an altar set too high and built of rotting pine. My father gave this woman, me, to some imposter who would want me to be faithful, as Ruth, which meant, I suppose, to follow my mother-in-law whither she goest. Yes, I wanted this, but want is a moment in a long sentence without punctuation. What if, like some birds, I could not sing in captivity? Would it be, I pleaded, security or maximum security? Divorce would disappoint my grandmother, crying here for joy in silk chiffon. And then at last I saw him, the one who wasn't playing anyway, his eyes hazel, shining like Aggies in first light. And I said, yes, of course, I will. Another poem on that same memories, which I probably shouldn't have, of my early life. This is called Cinderella. I was 15, too thin, and 6 feet tall, with outsized feet, though still believing in a glass slipper. Until that night at a high school dance when the teacher barked, "Every girl must toss one shoe on the ground, on the mound, for a boy to choose and take its owner." I gazed at shells and suede in patent leather, swirling with curving steps, ice-pick heels, and tucked my flat-heeled sandal under them, nails clawing through the heel I'd hammered off to stand a half-inch lower. They had said, "Someday you'll be glad you're tall," but someday was tonight. I hoped that some old suitor would see beyond the shoe to me myself. Boys hunted the heap. I saw my sandal left alone, intruder in the ring. Before the teacher poked it with a pointer, watched it squirm, and hoisted it high. Whose shoe is this? No need to ask again. I ran home barefoot in the rain, skidding on slick pavement, resolved to find my way that night and after. Never mind the prince. This next poem is called The Rainbow Sign, and it has an epigraph from an old song. God gave Noah the rainbow sign, no more water the fire next time. Like cotton candy spun of cloud and air, 2 ribbons slipped from yardage under the earth, spooling out brightness past a sea of shipwrecks. Yesterday's hurricane spun through the village, shattering panes, burying cars in sand, splintering a neighbor's wooden pier. Its piles still jutting up like broken molars, wrenching wires, screaming of loss, blackout. Our faces flushed in candlelight. We watched nerve ends of lightning, shocked the windows and questioned wall shadows for predictions. Today the rainbow sign, God's weather news. The water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. Relief? Well, promises. The longing for belief that comes in language clear as in a child's coloring book. Violet, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. Upgraded here to lilac, cobalt, clay. New life green, wheat yellow, and carmine. Rainbow healed the world with sudden light. Let us drive into bars of tinted gauze, then hide indoors until the fire next time. One poem about, one of my books is about art, another about music, and I'd like to represent them somehow. I am C.U.N.Y, my main man. This has refrains from the second commandment, which forbid this great painter to paint the figure because of his religion. He, of course, defied that commandment and painted great paintings, but he kept hearing that second commandment in his head all of his life, or so he did in my poem. I am C.U.N.Y. Hunger was bearable, but not their voices resonant as clock chimes in his head. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. Gaunt, bleary-eyed, he filched coins from a shelf, not for food, but for red and yellow pencils to draw a madman who had God's fixed stare. Locked in a cellar, gasping at cracks of light, unrepentant, he heard his parents wail, or any likeness of anything in heaven above. He sketched the rabbi trying to uncover red-yellow rays beneath the prayer shawl. Thrashed, he left his village of Smilovich and painted. Years passed. Over and again, he'd make a still life of a dead goose hen, for that is in the earth beneath. This one a hanging turkey, beak agape, wings splayed as though still flying. Days and nights he jabbed red-yellow strokes on canvas to make the wing spread, damning, pitying wings that reach for light and falling rise. Or that is in the water under the earth. Burned wings of Icarus, his father's hands, gnarled fingers, mending coats, the hands of Christ. Where God had been, the turkey shone, flesh-colored, as naked man over soutine in blood. And he sang to drown their sobbing, now grown louder. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. One poem about, I wrote a whole book about, of jazz poems, and I'll read Art Tatum. At the G. Stables, it's a place where he played on 52nd Street. Hands flew across the keys like osprey wings in high wind, solo flight. He played alone and cursed blurred sight, quicksilver notes unblurred. Uptown after hours, he cast out the tell-it-all to God, blessed be his name, whatever else might come, fury and grief. Uptown was where the real arpeggios soared in sweet Lorraine and Georgia on my mind, where eyelids covered visions like an arc, as he trilled a hymn he'd picked out once, when keys danced to his father's harp, to strings of a steel pipe mechanic after hours. Here the boss tapped a whisk broom on newspaper, and the frail stride piano outshone the grand earlier on 52nd Street, where white faces had gasped, stunned by the speed and accuracy of 200 runs, two-handed runs, never to know that when he left there caneless and taxied uptown, he, the put-on artist, sang out after hours and forgot. I'd like to read one more poem and then ask for questions. Can I do that, Meredith? This poem is called Because in a wounded universe, the tufts of grass still glisten, the first daffodil shoots up through ice melt, and a red-tailed hawk perches on a cathedral spire, and because children toss a fire-red ball in the yard where a schoolhouse facade was scarred by vandals, and joggers still circle a dry reservoir. Because a rainbow flaunts its painted ribbons and slips them somewhere underneath the earth. Because in a smoky bar, the trombone blares louder than street signs. Because those street sirens, because those who can no longer speak of pain are singing. And when on this wide meadow in the park, a full moon still outshines the city lights, and on returning home below the North Star, I see new bricks and glass where the towers fell. And I remember my love's calloused hand soften in my hand, while crabapple blossoms showered our lips, and a yellow rose opened with its satellites of orange buds. Because I cannot lose the injured world without losing the world, I'll have to praise it.